Hey everybody, it's Charles, your hobby hero, coming at you with another video today. We have seen an enormous jump in the Enchanted prices over the weekend, but even bigger news than that, we have news of an enormous restock coming at the end of this month for Chapter 1 and a little bit of Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, and we're going to break down all that in the video. But first, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button down in the bottom corner. I do appreciate it. I do put out regular content about the hobbies that I love the most, with this channel being dedicated to the Lorcana card game. Now, you heard me right, and it doesn't sound like the information makes a whole lot of sense, but we've got a lot of news this weekend that a huge restock is coming for Chapter 1 at the end of this month for all stores that are hosting store championships. And even with that information out there, we've seen a surge across the board in Enchanteds from Set 1, as well as some spiking from Enchanteds in Set 2 as well. We'll take a look at those prices here in a little bit, but first I wanted to talk a bit about that restock if you haven't heard about it now. Now, I want to emphasize this is a restock, not a reprint. These are boxes that have already been printed, that have been held at the distributors for this express purpose. So this is not another wave that has gone through the printers. This is not increasing the overall print quantity, but it is going to be increasing the population of Set 1 in the wild by a pretty hefty margin. So if you have not heard already, any store that has been hosting one of these store championships at the end of this month, which you may have already seen, if you haven't, I'll link a video that I did on those store championships up here at the top, will be getting an opportunity to order up to 6 cases of Chapter 1. Also have the ability to order up to 8 cases of Rise of the Floodborne and 4 cases of Into the Inkland. Now, I've had this confirmed locally by 2 stores, as well as seen numerous posts online from stores that have hosting store championships and have been told the same thing. Now, the stipulation with this is these stores are forbidden from selling any of this stuff online, so we shouldn't see any influx to TCG Player for any of these products. Now, we will see some. We're going to have stores who do go and break that and go straight to TCG Player to sell their additional product, which is unfortunate. We're also going to have players who either win these in some of the store championships as prizing and then throw those up for sale as well. But it is going to be creating a large new surplus of inventory that's going to come in basically out of nowhere. Nobody had any idea that this was coming, and that is a lot of product. I don't know if you've checked your surrounding area, but just within about a half-hour radius of where I live at, we've got about 6 stores that have been approved for this. So that's 6 stores at 24 cases a piece, and we're in a pretty small market here. If I expand that out to about an hour radius in each direction, that pulls in about 20 stores that have been approved for store championships, all of which can be getting 24 boxes of Set 1, the first chapter, which is a ton of new inventory to be added to it. Now, I don't know the exact number of stores who can host store championships. I'll include a link down below from one of the Melee team devs that actually has a store locator on it, but they've even admitted that this list is not 100% complete, as it depends a lot on the criteria of what the store actually called their tournament, whether it got picked up by this locator. But as you can see, there's a ton of locations that are going to be hosting this, and I can't imagine any of these stores are going to be declining to order the full 24 count of those boxes. So that's a ton of new inventory that's going to come in to every market that is out there that are hosting these events. If your store is hosting them and they aren't aware of this, make sure you reach out to them, because I have talked to a few store owners that hadn't heard this yet, had to call their distributor, and just found out very recently that this was going to be an option for them. I've not heard of any stores being told something differently other than those exact counts that they'll be able to order from. So barring any additional information, I'm just going to assume that that is an eligible offer for all stores of any size, as long as they were approved for a store championship, as a kind of thank you from Ravensburger for hosting events and hosting their first store championship. Now, having said that, even with that information, we've seen a huge spike in the Enchanted prices for set 1. So let's go ahead and jump in, take a look at some of those prices and what's going on with those cards. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at here is no surprise to the list, and that is Elsa Spirit of Winter, closing in on almost $2,000 for a near mint hollow foil. I mean, as you can see, this card has really just continued to climb, and it's not climbing slowly. These plateaus, we had one towards January, and then we had another one here in March. It's definitely slowed down in those areas, but never really retracing. And as you can see, like, we've got sold data on here. Now, these are our PSA 10 ones up here, and a PSA 9 one there. But you can see several sales for these at that 2,000 mark. We have a light play one at 1,400. Really just continuing to climb. Now, there's a lot of stuff that's going on here. You know, we've talked about in other videos as far as actual like market manipulation. The powers that be, the individuals out there that have a lot of these cards in their inventory already are obviously invested personally in making this card go up. So it doesn't need to be like a concerted effort, even from like a collective or a hive mind. Those individuals who already say have 4, 5, 6, maybe even only 1 or 2 of the Elsas already to their name, see stuff like this and can buy in and create legitimate sales. I don't think that these are all, you know, fabricated sales that are on here that are getting refunded or just never shipped so they don't have to pay. But they're creating these legitimate sales because then it legitimizes the increased value in their card. So if you bought in, let's say at $500-$600 on your copies of Elsa, and you see that a surge in activity is happening on those purchases, you can come in and maybe buy one at $1,500 or $1,600, because then it legitimizes that price point for all the copies that you have. So you spend $1,600 once to make your entire inventory of Elsas that you bought at $400, $500, $600 now worth that realized sale of $1,600. And so even though you don't have people who are faking sales, and I'm not saying none of these are faked, you have people who are creating sales not necessarily because of a supply and demand issue, but because they are personally invested in trying to legitimately increase the price point of those recorded sales, which is kind of the pro and the con of a place like TCG Player, which tracks all these listings. Things that would cause me to be concerned or think that this might be happening is just the volume of sales that we see of Elsa. Despite being one of the most expensive Enchanteds in the set, she just has the most movement of any of the Enchanteds really in the set as well. You can just see constantly multiple sales for this card going each and every day, which you just don't see real regularly in high price cards like this one, especially a card like this one, which is like almost 4 times as expensive as any other card in the game currently. I mean, you have a card here now that is in a regular printed set that is already starting to catch up with several of the D23 promos, including even the Elsa D23 promo. You have Elsa now selling for close to $2,000 as an Enchanted, whereas the D23 version of the card is only selling for about $3,000 in a near mint condition. And the populations on those two cards are nowhere even close, with the D23 having only about 352 PSA 10 copies in existence and only 543 total graded copies in existence. And we've also confirmed that there's only about 1,000 total copies of Elsa Snow Queen, because of the D23 Expo Collector set were limited to, I think, 9,000 or either 1,000 or 999 or something like that, in that range, with about half of them already having been graded and 352 of those coming in at a PSA 10, versus the Enchanted Elsa Spirit of Winter, which is the highest population of graded cards on PSA's census for the first chapter, with a whopping 1,625 copies of this card are already graded, and a very large percentage of those, 1,188 to be exact, as of today, coming back as a PSA 10. And even of those that don't get the PSA 10, an additional 380 of them are in that PSA 9 range. So the vast majority of the ones getting graded are already in that high grade 9 or 10 anyways. But this card is growing at such an alarming rate, while cards like the D23 ones have really been stale for a while now. And it's getting to the point where this particular card is being speculated and hyped and bought out and manipulated so much that it's getting to where it could end up passing up some of these D23 promos permanently, which is just absolutely crazy to me. But enough about Elsa. Let's look at some of these other buyouts that are happening right now. We've got Belle, Strange but Special, and the Unlimited Hollow Foil. It's jumped up to about 560. We can see it really spiked at the end of last month. It had been hovering around that $300 price range for a while. Now the sales are pushing $500 and $600 on this particular card. Stitch is the biggest one by far, with 15 listings right now. So he's got more listings than Belle, and his lowest listing price is at that $645. Seen some PSA 10s of Stitch already selling for $1,000. We've got one right there, but you can see two completed sales at this new kind of benchmark, one at $650 and one at $666. And again, just another one where he'd been kind of steady around that kind of low or high 200s, low 300 mark, and really just shot up over just this past weekend. And you're going to see that the same kind of process on a lot of these. Again, just this very recent spike over this past weekend. And I'm not entirely sure where this influx of purchases is coming from, especially since late last week is when we got the news that we were going to be getting more of these Chapter 1 boxes in. But I mean, you see even the Chapter 1 boxes have spiked. I mean, we have, thousands of these boxes that are going to be hitting store shelves in about a week and a half to 2 weeks, depending on where your store is holding their championship. And as we can see, that we had a price, that's been steadily climbing and has skyrocketed in the wake of even that news of more stuff hitting the shelves. Mickey Mouse, another big gainer, even all the way down to the lowly Hades here. We can see him jumping up way over his market price, with near mints sitting at $180. One of the few Enchanteds that has actually been coming down in price, and even he is getting a big spike here with some purchases up well above what he has been at for a long time. I don't know if this is kind of a surge to kind of set a new market because they're anticipating a bunch of new Enchanteds coming into the marketplace. But I would just be cautious at buying any at these prices, as with the influx of that much product, we should see a dip in the Chapter 1 pricing. As you have to think, with these basically being one per case, every store that you frequent or go to is going to be adding 6 additional first chapter Enchanteds to the marketplace. And if you times that by the number of stores across the US and other countries that are going to be hosting these events, that is a tremendous amount of inventory that should be hitting the shelves. That's more inventory than most of these stores got when Wave 1 originally dropped. I know most of the stores in my area were anywhere from 10 to 24 boxes. So for a good number of stores locally, to me at least anyways, this is the most first chapter that any of them will have had access to. So it is going to be affecting those prices. So I would just be cautious of buying into any of these prices at this point in time, whether it be sealed product or any of these inflated set one Enchanteds. But if you have them right now and you're looking to sell, you do have enough legitimate sales to get some of these out into the market and make a nice little bit of change on any of these, and then hopefully rebuy if there is a dip with the additional product that is hitting. Now, looking at Rise of the Floodborne, now they are getting less Rise of the Floodborne than they are of the first chapter, and there's still a decent amount of Rise of the Floodborne that is sitting out there. As you can see, boxes are not even over MSRP at this point, yet we've got 3 buyouts that are already happening for this one as well. Cinderella has been spiking for a while, but now she's coming in at almost $850 for the lowest version of her online. So she's catching up to Elsa in a big way, as you can see. And this one, unlike Elsa, isn't going to be having an influx of additional inventory coming at the end of this month. There will be some coming, but certainly far less demand for set 2 as far as people opening set 2 product, and far less of the actual inventory that is getting shipped out as far as this restock goes. But as you can see, completed sales all the way up to almost $700 for this card coming in today. And the lowest listed price of $850. This card is certainly jumping out as the standout for Chapter 2. However, Alice and Snow White both have got buyouts actively going right now. Alice is kind of a surprise for me. This one's demand was actually pretty low, and as you can see, one of those rare Enchanteds that actually had a dip in price. There's not a ton of those, so the fact that this one was both one that had dipped and then got targeted for a buyout, and as you can see, has just colossally climbed. Beginning of March, she is $150, so basically the price of a box if you opened her in that box, to now we've got foils selling for $350, and lowest listed price for any of them is $500. I don't know if this one will be able to hold on to the price tag. I just don't see, again, the demand historically for this one has just not been high enough to keep it up there. I don't foresee, even in the wake of these like $300 sales, which there are several of because of, like, again, the buyout of this card here, I just don't see somebody pulling the trigger at this $495 at this point. Now, don't get me wrong, like this is a long-term thing. If you're watching this video, months, years from now, $495 may seem like a steal. But right now, I just think for $495, you can go buy basically 2 boxes of the first chapter. And, statistically, you're halfway to an Enchanted from a set 1 Enchanted at that point, plus all the extra stuff that would be in that box. Now, one that I do think has a lot of potential for this set is the Snow White. Lowest near mint is $400 on her right there. Again, this is another one that did retrace for a while and then shot way, way, way up here. Now, the reason why I have a little bit more faith in her than I do over Alice is Snow White's PSA 10s have always been kind of an anomaly to the regular price anyway. So prior to this, I'd actually bought several Snow Whites to grade and flip after they were graded, because even as a $140 card, her PSA 10s were selling for like $500-$600. So there's obviously a sphere of collectors that are out there that have a desire to own this card, and they want it in either for display purposes or just for that rarity of that PSA 10. But the PSA 10 versions of these Snow Whites were already climbing at a very alarming rate. So for me, this is similar to like the set 1 Aurora. This card is just starting to kind of catch up to its actual price. Aurora for the longest time in set 1 was a $150 to $170 card, but her PSA 10s were selling for $400 to $600. And eventually that card has just caught up to, I think, its kind of organic demand. And I think that's what we're going to start to see with Snow White. So while there are a lot of similarities between her and Alice, and I certainly don't think she's any more playable or anything like that than Alice. I do think there are just more collectors that really value the legitimate princesses kind of the Disney films. It will be easier for this card to hold this inflated price than I think than the Alice would be. So if you're looking at those two from set 2 and kind of trying to decide which one of those is a more legitimate price tag, I would tend to lean towards the Snow White. Across the board down here, though, we haven't seen much movement out of any of the other Enchanteds. Out of set 2, if anything, they're still kind of dwindling and going down. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't some good buys in the other Enchanteds. For example, if you're looking at PSA 10 prices, PSA 10 Madame Mims are going for about $300. So that's a good increase in value compared to a lot of even the bigger ones. I mean, Cinderella right now, again, selling for $700, but the PSA 10s are only selling for about $1,100. So you're not even quite doubling your money on that, where you're almost tripling it on the Madame Mims, even after grading fees. So there are some good buys in the Enchanteds. Just make sure that you are checking out not only what you're paying for the near mint prices, but if you're looking into like grading and then flipping, what those things are selling for on the PSA 10 side. Because honestly, some of these bigger ones aren't even really worth grading. As I mentioned, like Snow White specifically, I think her PSA 10s really haven't moved much, even with this increase in price. So you have near mints selling for $400 and paying $75 plus shipping for a grading fee to have the PSA 10s, which are still selling for like $500. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense on some of those cards right now, which could make some of these other cards actually better buys. And then briefly just looking at Into the Inklands, there's not really been much movement here. Ursula's actually kind of slowed down from her descent, so to speak. I honestly thought she was going to drop further faster, as I think it's becoming more and more apparent to people that the correction on her card is probably not likely to ever see print. And if it does, it will be in a much rarer quantity than the current number of printings of the one with the error. We talked about that a little bit on our first market watch with this particular card, but she is still holding up strong. I thought she was probably going to drop to like the mid to high 200s, and she's really kind of set her floor at these low 300s, which is still a pretty healthy premium for kind of the new set. I mean, she's debuting higher than really any of the other Enchanteds have right out of the gates at this point in their kind of lifespan. So we could start to see her going up. Now, I, for one, think that's awesome on one hand because this was kind of my favorite artwork out of the set. Also a very playable card, obviously. And then on the flip side of that, kind of bummed because I still haven't managed to open one, and I don't really want to pull the trigger at this $300 price point yet. But it is what it is. I'm happy that it is kind of the standout card from the set. But as you can see, really no movement in the northward direction from any of these other ones. Now, like I said, similar to the Madame Mim, there are several of these that are great values if you're trying to grade and flip. Here recently, there was a Chernobog PSA 10 that just sold for, I think, $300 in a PSA 10. So doubling up your investment even after grading fees on a card like that. And we actually just had a Scrooge McDuck finish at auction for $635 in a PSA 10, which is a huge markup from its original price. Now, again, there have been lower sales of that card recently as well, so that's kind of an extreme example, but still an example that we see of that card and those possible multipliers on some of these cards in their PSA 10 forms. So again, you can't just look at the Enchanteds for just their base values. A lot of times you have to put those in comparisons to what their multiplier is in those higher PSA 10s as well. And honestly, as a whole, this set is holding up much better than I would have thought Enchanted-wise, with the addition of the Enchanteds. Now, that they did add some real stinkers to the pool here with these locations. As you can see, all of them kind of below even the low box price for this set. But all in all, a lot of these characters are kind of overperforming where I thought they would be dollar price, especially with box prices being as low as they are, with almost every character in the set holding at $100 or higher. For the newest set, that's fairly impressive, since we had first chapter ones under $100 up until probably January or February of this year. So the fact that this being the newest set and most of the enchanted characters have established themselves at a base above $100 is pretty crazy, especially with box prices barely over that $100 mark themselves. So a lot of good opportunities for people who may not have the money to be buying Elsas and grading Elsas and then trying to flip those over and over again. There's some great opportunities inside the kind of lesser valued Enchanteds, especially when you look at some of the more popular characters that haven't coincided with, necessarily the highest premium prices even inside those sets. If you guys have some interest in me breaking down, PSA 10 values versus the core values of some of these cards, let me know in the comment section down below too, because that's something I do a lot with these market prices. I'll take a look at some of these underperforming cards and see what they're completing their PSA 10 listings at, and kind of see if they're worth buying up at those amounts as well. Just a quick summary, I would probably stay away from set 1 Enchanteds at this point as far as purchasing. And if you're looking to kind of get into dabbling on like the buying, selling, and trading side of it, I think your best opportunities are probably inside of set 3, possibly in set 2, depending on kind of what your budget for buying and grading would be versus some of those other options that are out there. So there you guys have it, kind of a market update as well as some good news, I hope, for those of you who may be late to getting their hands on first chapter, that more is on the way. If you guys have any additional questions, make sure you hit me up down in the comment section below. Until next time, guys, Hobby Hero